health issues, plus now I have no other reason to live. Basically, when we go to suicides, a lot of times you'll see a suicide note will be, I'm sorry, but I lost my job, I lost my family, I lost my wife, I have no money, I lost my status in society, I have nothing to live for. So some of those people will just kill themselves, all right? However, if they lost their job, or if they are getting divorced because their wife mistreated them, or if there's some sort of issue that they felt they were completely disrespected, those are the people that might go in and take revenge against the people that did them wrong. We went back to the revenge.
Yeah.
We talked about revenge, represent, and stranger. That's the revenge. You have all these factors that come into play.
Well, the other thing with certain types of mental illness is the inability, and it also goes to certain types of personalities, it's the inability to take responsibility for their own actions.
Absolutely.
Like, you made me do this. You made me do this. And you hear it all the time.
Oh, criminals never. Criminals will always place the blame on their behavior or their situation on someone else. It's society. It's the government. It's my teachers. It's my parents. It's my football. Whatever it is, they'll never, ever, ever blame themselves. Very rare where you see a criminal say, yep, I did it. I went in there, I shot 30 people just because I'm a fucking nut.
Yeah. And this is the thing. This is the thing that's missing.
They're not going to say that.
And here's the thing too: as we try to figure, we in society, and that's in the press and those in law enforcement, try to figure out what it is, what the reasons are. So often it just comes down to the fact that I'm a nut. I'm an a-hole.
The evil that men do.
Yeah,
an evil. They're just evil.
I'm an evil person, and that's the part that. It's the X factor in crime. Basically, is the unexplainable. Like, we can say that person X was violent because he had a violent this and a violent this and a violent this, but at the end of the day, sometimes it's like, well, he went in to kill people because his wife was cheating on him.
Yep.
All right, and then you find out, well, they've been separated for a year. And she's dating somebody else, but this guy's a jerk. This guy most people can rationalize and deal with being let go from a job. Most people can rationalize and deal with, maybe having an issue, domestic issue at home, and their kids don't like dad anymore, or the mom's out there, fucking the whole neighborhood. Most people can deal with that, Dave. Most people.
It's that one guy that can't deal with it, and he's out there seeking revenge. How do you pick those guys out? But we for the last hour, we kind of went over all these little indicators. What does your instinct tell you? Yep. What does their reputation tell you? Is there some mental health issues? Do they have a history of that? What do people say about that person? All these little things that you kind of bring together can help you make a better decision on who the person is you're dealing with in the end, who you're dealing with in the end. Yeah. And if you can identify that person, as a student in a school, then you want to watch that person. Mm-hmm. If you can identify that person as your next door neighbor, then you want to be buddy with them, Dave. You don't want to, don't want to piss off your next door neighbor.
Like, hey, I noticed you were flinging your dog's poop into my yard. But
if you know all these little indicators that he has, you're like, oh, his wife just broke up with him. I see about 30 prescription pill bottles in his trash. This guy's got some issues. You want to kick, you want that verbal judo to kick in, Dave, and pacify and de-escalate those situations, because it's really not worth pissing someone like that off. Absolutely not.
Let me ask you this question. Because I actually had somebody who came up to this, had this situation with a neighbor, and the neighbor was, I knew two families that were on either side of this neighbor, and this guy would actually do this. He would take his dog poop and flip it over the fence. And there were elderly people in both, on both sides. There were elderly people. Yep. And I knew the sons on both. And the sons in one family were fairly small, and they were, lawyers. And the friends in the other family were pretty big. Pretty big. And the way that they eventually ended they eventually took care of the situation is that the big sons knocked on the door and said, if you ever do that again, we're coming back.
Absolutely.
And that's how, and it ended. And
sometimes that works. Absolutely. I know of a situation where a young girl was being bullied at school by an older girl. So what happened? The school tried to intervene. Schools don't do anything.
Right.
You got to protect your own kids. So what happened was the father found out, and he says, okay, so you're a 6th grader and she's a 9th grader, whatever it was, and she's not listening. So he tracked down the girl's father, grabbed him by, the shirt collar and said, listen up, pal. Your daughter ever touches my daughter again, I'm going to knock your head off. So you better keep your daughter in check. And guess what? I hate to say it, sometimes some people only respond to that.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
But obviously for this case, we've got people who are escalating. So what happens if I'm sorry, where are we now?
Yeah, so we went over a lot of the factors. We went over, identify your weaknesses as a person, and I try to identify certain situations that, make you feel uncomfortable. Now, how do you react to that? And we kind of went over that. It was how you react to these situations, especially violent, active shooter situations, people with weapons. You're in a restaurant, you're in a school, you're in your office. You can either, like I said, run, hide, or fight. All right, so we'll repeat that. If you are in a place where you can run, if you're on the first floor of an office building and you see someone coming in with a gun, and if you can run out the side door, then run away as far away as possible. If that's not an option, then you can hide. If you can hide, like I said, we lock the doors, we secure the doors, and while you're hiding, you want to look for certain weapons, because if they get through that door, or if they breach that perimeter, you're going to have to fight if that's your instinct. And I would think if you're confronted with a life or death situation, and there's 3 or 4 people hiding in a break room, and there happens to be a few knives or pots and pans or a fire extinguisher, if that person breaks through the door, then I would hope that you would fight and use whatever weapon you have available, to include your fists, your feet, or any other improvised weapon that you can find. So then that's pretty much what they'll teach you in law enforcement and most active shooters situations. Run, hide, and fight is the option that you'll be given when everything else.
And that's the order too. And that's the order too.
Yeah, pretty much run, hide, and fight. But you want to know your environment. Ultimately, you want to know your environment. Like I said, if you're on the 50th floor of an office building, guess what? You should already have visualized how it goes back to the panic and fear. You should already have visualized what you would do. 50th floor, where you going? You're going nowhere.
Right.
You're going nowhere. So you might as well go with the where can I hide if something ever happens? How would I fight if something ever happens? But even back that up even more. And that's why we kind of went with the identify. Can I identify the nut in my office? Can I identify the kid in the high school or the elementary school who's got some issues, and we need to kind of be aware of that person? That's because right. Once you go into the run, hide, and fight mode, something at some point in that chain broke down because someone missed something here.
Right.
Or unless it was a stranger, unless it was just some random radical nut who just happened to pick your office building and walked up into your office building and started shooting people in your office. If that isn't the case, and it's usually not the case, it's usually not just a random situation.
Right. But it could
be. But there's usually some motivating factor behind why they went to that place.
What are are there any statistics on how often the active shooter is known to the victims?
Yeah, absolutely. It's at a high 70 to 80 percentile.
All right. I'm thinking in the domestic violence case, I think didn't that happen in a hospital in Boston over the last couple of years, where somebody was having an affair and then the guy showed up?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
And so let's say the husband comes in because the wife's been having an affair. You might not recognize the husband. I mean, it might not be known to everybody. He's only known to
a few people in the hospital. Yeah,
I had a coworker years ago, and something was going. Yeah, I know what's going on. Her marriage was dissolving.
Domestic situations are the most violent, hands down. Anything with a domestic,
and that
husband, wife, child, parents, whatever the situation is, any domestic situation is highly unpredictable. Meaning to where the extent the violence will go.
Right, because it could go to the workplace.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then the rest of it is just really tough to predict because you can have that adolescent kid who wants to shoot up a school. You can have the, as you said, the stranger, the person who's just evil, who just wants to be, maybe he wants to be. How often do people who go out plan to a homicide followed by suicide by cop?
Yeah, most people have that planned out. The suicide by cop type of thing, that's usually a planned situation, meaning they don't necessarily have the nerve to do it themselves. Mm-hmm. So they will come up with whatever plan that they have, whether they're going to do an active shooter situation, they're going to shoot themselves in the head, or they're going to walk outside of their house with a knife or a gun, and the cops will show up, and they can probably safely conclude that if I walk out of my house with a knife or a gun and I start threatening police officers, more likely than not, you're going to get shot.
Yeah.
And most cops are pretty good shots, so you're going to probably get killed because they're going to shoot you.
Or shoot center mass.
They're going to shoot center mass, which is your chest, your lungs, your head, areas where you can't survive.
The one final specific case, the Las Vegas shooting.
Yep.
From a few years ago. Mandalay Bay, where they just basically seemed to. Was he shooting into the crowd? Was that the?
He was just on one of the hotel rooms with a sniper rifle, just randomly shooting, and there was a concert, just shooting randomly to whoever. Just a complete nut. Probably didn't know anyone down there because he was so far away. He couldn't necessarily pick out someone he knew. Just why do people and he ultimately killed himself. Right. So the rational mind would be, why did you have to kill 56 people?
Yeah.
Why didn't you just go in your truck, go out in the desert, have a beer, have your last meal, and shoot yourself? Why'd you have to kill? Why'd you do that? Why right. 56 people?
And he didn't fit any of the criteria.
No, they were trying to figure him out.
He had money. He was social.
A lot of people are loners and they don't fit into society, right. And they're outcast, or at least they believe they're outcast, or there's been some disconnect with society at some point in their life, mental health issue. Obviously, he had, he was, that closet terrorist, like those terrorists at 9/11. No one knew who they were, and they just came out of the blue. There are people like him out there, but he's rare. He's a rare occurrence. That's absolutely not the norm, thankfully.
All right. Well, I think we're coming.
This has been very, very morbid.
Yeah, this has been morbid. So what about the old days when we could just laugh and joke about crime? Anyway, thanks for all the information. If you're still with us, you've had a lot to digest over the last however long we've been up.
1 hour, 14 minutes, and 15, 16, 17 seconds, and counting.
We promise never to be this serious again. And obviously, Dale's done a lot of research. He had to watch a lot of Law and Order to come up with this information. A lot of Criminal Minds to get into the mind of the killer. And so again, the last thing to think about is this. Know your surroundings.
Stay in the zone. Always be focused in the zone.
But isn't that going to create?
Well, yeah, it creates a lot of anxiety in your life.
And then if you're the person, then you'll be the one who snaps.
Yeah.
And then
be focused on your surroundings and be aware of. Mr. Rogers. We'll end it with this. Mr. Rogers said it best. Who are the people in your neighborhood? Be aware of the people in your neighborhood.
In your neighborhood, which includes your workplace, which includes your school, which includes your movie theater. So be aware of who's there, what's there, and what were the three words again? Run, hide,
fight.
Run, hide, fight. This has been Inside the Thin Blue Line. We'll be back in a couple of days with nonsense, I hope. I hope we get into a little bit
hopefully
more.
Nathan's going to be coming back.
Speaking of nonsense. All right, thanks. Thanks, Dale.